unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Eddie Hearn says that Canelo fighting Bivol is much tougher and David Benavidez is much easier than the fight with Bivol. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. We unpacked. I'm the best in the business, and this is going to be a fun one, so make sure you guys keep up. Eddie Hearn, he is at it again. He did an interview, and he put his 2 cents in, and he says that a fight with Bivol would be substantially harder for Canelo Alvarez as opposed to a Benavidez fight. Quote, "The next fight is Dimitri Bivol. Contractually, we have to go through that process for the rematch. We're already close to making that fight." So Eddie Hearn saying they're close to making that fight, even though Canelo's scheduled to fight John Ryder. So it says a lot about the John Ryder fight, because look at how disrespectful it is, and it shows you what type of piss poor match the Canelo and John Ryder really truly is. To put John Ryder, he's already at a skill deficit, because most people would definitely say Canelo is the more experienced and better fighter. Plus, it's in Canelo's backyard in Mexico. So he really has no working advantages. And this is known by DAZN and Eddie Hearn, because he's saying that the Bivol fight, they're close to making that fight happen, right? So if they're close to making a fight, then that means you're disrespecting John Ryder and you're already looking past him. I digress. Let me keep going. Eddie Hearn says, Eddie Reynoso already asked me months ago to do the John Ryder fight for May 6th in Guadalajara, Mexico. So Team Canelo requested the John Ryder fight, so it's notated, and that's per Eddie Hearn. If we can't get the Bivol fight done, absolutely. Benavidez is also WBC mandatory. We talked about the mandatory situation. He's going to have to fight him at some stage. Trust me when I say I worked with Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso. They will work with anyone. They don't care, right? So this is what Eddie Hearn is saying. He goes on to say there's a difference between hitting him with everything and putting him out cold. That's what Canelo did. So for me, I'd back Canelo all day long. And he's talking about the mutual opponent in Caleb Plant, and Canelo fought Caleb Plant as well. Eddie Hearn concludes by saying, I think Benavidez is a great fighter, and after he's fought Ryder and Bivol, I would like to see that fight, and ultimately the governing bodies would as well. David Benavidez is a much easier fight for Canelo than Bivol at 175. As good as Benavidez is a great fight, but it's a lot easier fight than Bivol at 175. You have to understand, as well as that personally for Canelo Alvarez, thinking beyond John Ryder is avenging that defeat against Dimitri Bivol. That's the most important thing in his career, beating Dimitri Bivol, because everyone is saying that's a bad fight for you and you shouldn't take that fight. That's the worst thing you could say to Canelo Alvarez. Actually, David Benavidez is an easier fight for Canelo Alvarez than Bivol, but personally, he has to avenge that defeat. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Eddie Hearn is in full promoter mode and ain't nobody trying to hear it. Man, listen, you can say whatever you want. For starters, you can tell Eddie Hearn he's not making a lot of sense, and I'm going to explain that. Because Canelo Alvarez is a fighter, and you could say the Bivol fight is much tougher. That's his opinion. But it's boxing, which there's different styles, there's different people with different attributes. So how come they can't both be dangerous styles? Like, what if both of them can beat Canelo Alvarez, right? He's saying it's much easier, but Benavidez has a shot to beat Canelo Alvarez. He absolutely does. Albeit he has a different style, his own style. He doesn't fight like Bevo, but who's to say that that fight is easier? Because at the end of the day, styles make fights, and both guys are capable of beating Canelo Alvarez. Bevo already did it, but Benavidez, if given the shot and the opportunity, maybe he can do it as well. Seeing is believing. So bump what Eddie Hearn is saying. We want to see the fight. Now, you can argue what fight you think would give Canelo more problems, but you could also be right there in the center and believe that both guys could potentially beat Canelo or give him problems. So what are we talking about, right? There's other guys, Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, and David Morrell Jr., David Benavidez, Artur Beterbiev. You could say Bivol's the toughest fight out there if you want to, but in all actuality, those are the guys that people want to see Canelo fight. Now, moving on, another thing that we have to add to this equation is we already got to see the Bivol fight. Canelo stunk up the joint. He was getting pushed around, and his fans made excuses and said, oh, Bivol was too big. Canelo dared to be great. He's not a true light heavyweight. So why do I want to see that fight again? Because here's what's going to happen. If Canelo gets past John Ryder, and if they do the Bivol fight, I truly believe, knowing Canelo's moves before he makes them, he is not going to try to fight Dimitri Bivol under the same conditions that gave him the initial loss, meaning at 175 with no rehydration clause. It will be Canelo versus Bivol at a catch weight, Canelo versus Bivol, Bivol coming down to 168 to fight for quote unquote Canelo's undisputed titles, etc. So Bivol at 75 with no rehydration clause is a difficult fight for Canelo. We seen that and it was showed. So I promise you, Canelo is going to be absolutely devastated because I'm going to make a series of videos. If he gets past Ryder and he tries to fight Bivol at any other weight with any stipulations outside of what the first fight took place at, then that's a cowardly move, because you had the opportunity to use your A-side leverage in the first fight. You thought you were big and bad. You thought you could beat Bivol at his best at light heavyweight, where he's a champion at 175, and you didn't need a rehydration clause. So if you're saying you can now beat him, you need to beat him under those same terms. You can't switch up the term, because then that doesn't really prove you can beat him if you fight him in a new weight class where he hasn't really fought at 168, at least in several fights. I don't know if ever. I don't know when he fought at 168, because he's a light heavyweight, which is 175. So that's going to look beyond ridiculous. So if Eddie Hearn is going to say that Benavidez is a much easier fight, then you need to fight Bivol at 175 with no rehydration clause, because Bivol is not a champion at 168. He is not proven at a 168. We don't know if he can make the weight comfortably at this stage. He's like 33 years old or whatever age he is. We don't know if he's comfortable in making the weight. Yes, he called out Canelo at that weight years ago. Canelo didn't answer the call until much later, when Bivol seemed to be regressing, and then Bivol just put it all together, and he's been on a run since, with the Canelo win and Zurdo Ramirez win and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's going to look bad. If I promise you, Canelo's going to look horrible if he fights Bivol at any other weight. Because if this whole talking point from Eddie Hearn and Team Canelo's we want revenge, you have to go back into the same fight that it was in the first time and prove that you can beat. Otherwise, you didn't prove anything, right? You're not avenging anything if you switch up the terms completely. You know, like, hey, I could beat you at 175. You come up mad short, lose almost every round. You win maybe 2 or 3 rounds. And then you're saying, hey, I could beat this guy. My hand was bad. I was injured. You got the surgery on your hand. So fight him at the full 175. Back to the David Benavidez fight. Here's the other issue with Eddie Hearn saying that, oh, the fight's easier and Bivol's harder and stuff like that. I am a consumer of boxing. Who cares what you think I want to pay for Canelo versus Benavidez. I've already watched Canelo versus Bevo. He got tore up and he had an immediate rematch clause that he did not use. I'm not really interested in that fight. The bigger fight, you could say whatever fight you think is harder and tougher, that remains to be seen until he fights Benavidez. But what I do know for a fact is Canelo versus Benavidez is bigger. It's a blockbuster fight. Benavidez just solidified himself in a great fight. Caleb Plant fought like a true warrior and acquitted himself well. I don't care that Canelo stopped him and Benavidez, beat Caleb Plant up in the second half of the fight. Because to be honest, the way David Benavidez did, to me, I think that put more mileage on Caleb Plant than the Canelo fight. Because the Canelo fight, Caleb Plant was having success early, just like he was in the fight with David Benavidez, and he just got stopped out of nowhere. He just got hit with a shot. He was fatiguing or whatever, got hit with some good shots, and then, Canelo finished it. So that was cool for Canelo. But at the same time, the beating from the last several rounds in the Benavidez fight, that could have put a lot more mileage on because it was sustained. It was a sustained attack with hard shots and hooks and body shots. We have to see how Caleb can even bounce back from that, because what I've noticed in boxing is sometimes when guys get punished and battered, those can be harder to actually come back from. Like you look at Wilder versus Bermane-Stiverne. The first fight, I don't really know if Bermane-Stiverne ever was the same kind of guy in the ring after that first Wilder fight. And he didn't get stopped either. Like he got dropped in the first round. They ruled it a slip because Bermane-Stiverne tackled Wilder, and he just took sustained punishment from a very hard puncher. But then he took almost a year off, couple months off, fought later in the year, and Bermane-Stiverne got dropped by Derek Rossi, I think was the guy's name. So I don't think Bermane-Stiverne really recovered from that. And then of course he lost in the first round in the Wilder rematch. But sometimes taking a sustained beating could be worse because, you're taking punishment upon punishment and you're showing heart. That's why they say you got to save a fighter from themselves. These fighters are brave and whatnot. Caleb Plant, he was out of answers, and I don't know how he made it out the ring, on his feet, but he got battered in some of those later rounds. Plus, people keep saying this, Canelo stopped him, but Benavidez couldn't. It was I'm not big on people saying stuff and then providing no context. That's why I'm the best in the business, because when I talk boxing, I know what I'm talking about, and I always provide context. So the context is Kenny Bayless did a bad job officiating the Benavidez versus Plant fight. Anybody who watched that, many of the people and spectators and pugilists were saying this, right? So that right there created a completely different dynamic. Canelo is, a media darling and stuff. So the referees tend to usually kind of side with him, judges side with him, let him work. But for whatever reason, Kenny Bayless was very one-sided towards Caleb Plant, and all of his remarks about how Benavidez was hitting low or using his forearms, all the negative things were, really geared towards Benavidez. So that was a completely different fight. He allowed Caleb Plant to clinch a lot, especially in the second half of the fight when he was hurt. So who knows? Benavidez might have been able to get the stoppage if Caleb wasn't resourceful enough to clinch, or allowed, like if Caleb Plant got deducted a point from the fight for clinching, then he would have a hard time clinching. But Bayless never did that, and the stoppage never really came. But if a fighter knows he can't clinch, and that's kind of what Caleb Plant's later rounds was happening, maybe he could have got the stoppage. So completely different circumstances. Bottom line, Canelo's Benavidez is what people want to see and what people want to pay for. Eddie Hearn can say all this other goofy stuff. We've already seen the Bivol fight. Canelo lost that one too. Give someone else a chance. Benavidez speaks Spanish, speaks English. Canelo speaks Spanish, speaks English. It's a bigger fight. And just because you personally think that Bivol is tougher, who cares? Show me, because I know what I want to pay for, and that's Canelo Benavidez. And I think that's a dangerous fight too, despite Bivol sparring. Bivol sparred with Benavidez, and Bivol himself says he thinks Benavidez can beat Canelo possibly, right? He said he has what it takes, right? So at the end of the day, Eddie Hearn's opinion on what's easier and harder, he's not the fighter. He don't have to get in there. Bivol himself, look it up. Bivol himself said Benavidez can win versus Canelo. And Bivol also said he wants to go on. He's more interested in unifying and becoming undisputed with Better Biev. So that's a better chain of events, is Bivol versus Better Biev, two guys that are actually 175 pounders. Real talk, Canelo doesn't deserve a rematch because he had an immediate rematch clause and he didn't take it. And now he wants to come back when he wants to, and he'll probably try to stipulate Bivol. So I'm not really interested in that fight. You had an immediate rematch. If you were feeling froggish, you should have leaped and you should have fought Bivol like the true great fighters, Andre Wards and Floyd Mayweather. When they had any type of controversies with Castillo's and Maidana, they did immediate rematches. When Ward had the alleged controversy with Kovalev, he did an immediate rematch. Canelo wants to fight 41-year-old Golovkin and fight John Ryder and try to get his bearings back or whatever, and then fight Bivol, and that's an unnecessary fight. Give an opportunity to a young, hungry guy who's on the cusp of superstardom, and that's David Benavidez. You know, fans would pay for that. Who cares if one fight's tougher? Because the reality is this: Bivol, what are we saying is tough? Because Bivol he outboxed Canelo. Benavidez is mean and he's coming to hurt, so he can potentially batter Canelo if he's getting off like he was getting off with Caleb Plant in the later rounds. So these are completely different fights. Bivol, likely, if he fights Canelo again, you know, it'll probably be more like he did, educated, masterclass. When you fight Benavidez, it's a completely different tempo, and he's trying to really hurt you in there. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Is Eddie Hearn full of it? Is Boxing Ego the best? I know I am. I'm the best in the business, and I'm out. Introducing Super Thanks. Right here on the official Boxing Ego YouTube. Super Thanks allows you, the viewers, to show a little bit of extra gratitude, which enables me as a full-time content creator to push out the content you need in the world of boxing. Underneath all the videos, you will see a heart with the $sign in it. You can enter any amount that you find suitable as a super thanks. A brand new, interactive, and colorful way to get your comments highlighted and noticed by not only myself, but other people on the YouTube platform. Super thanks, a unique and cool way to show and applaud us full-time content creators. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content. Super thanks. The future is now. The Hibernation 5s by Kenichi Bear. Hybrid gaming and lifestyle headphones. Out of the box, you can connect to any console or PC. Bluetooth ready with a low latency USB adapter, color RGB, and extreme bass mode. The Hibernation 5s adjust to you. Whether you need a gaming, travel, gym, or lifestyle headphones, the Hibernations got you covered. The new Hibernation 5s, link in the description. Customize the way you hear the world. Welcome to the nation. Are you tired of your YouTube videos not getting any views? Well, consider TubeBuddy. I've used TubeBuddy for years to scale up my YouTube channel. Now we're sitting over 200,000 subscribers. TubeBuddy is a browser extension that offers a ton of built-in productivity and time-saving services to take your channel to the next level. Use my link in the description to get started with TubeBuddy and level up your channel faster. We working.